It's great to be here. I'm Jodie Harrison. I'm an insights consultant at Inpulse. So as you'll see as we go through today's webinar, it's really been the focus of what I look at in terms of the data and pulling together the trends of what's going on behind that to then share that with you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jodie. And I'm Matt Stevens, CEO, founder of Inpulse, and delighted to be talking about this really vital topic. I'm very passionate about this. I wrote a book about emotional analytics, I think 4 years ago now, very much looking at focusing on how people are feeling and why is a really key enabler and driver of employee engagement. And actually, as we go over the course of this hour that we're going to have together, and actually we'll try and bring it into land slightly early to give you some time back, so that we know margin is so key in business. That no one's ever got any margin, that 5 minutes between meetings. So we're going to try and create some margin for you and finish a little bit early for your next meeting or whatever you're going on to. So let's get into it. And just to say, really pleased if you would ask questions. We'd love you to get involved. We tend to find the best way is just put it on the Q&A or put it on chat, and we'll answer them as we go. And so over the course of the now 50 minutes we have left together, so we want to get into the relationship between engagement and emotions, and what that looks like and what that means. We want what's the data actually telling us? What's the story it's showing, and share that with you. Then a bit about our approach to measuring engagement, and if you put it like this, what we're trying to do here is kind of throw some seeds out and see where they land and get you thinking, so that when you're looking at it in your organization and from your perspective, hopefully we've got you we've got you thinking about are we doing it in the best way possible. It's not about right and wrong, being honest, but it is about, are we doing the most the way that's most helpful and is going to get us the best insight. And that's why we're going to finish with where to focus your attention. So I think just actually before we get on to what it said here, is what we've spent quite a bit of time doing is looking at what's called the correlation coefficient. And that is basically, if I had to make that really simple for you, it's like if we look at all these questions that people ask in engagement, a coefficient of 1 when it comes to correlation basically means that question completely aligns to people being engaged, and that's what you're looking for. And so when we run our correlation coefficient, we're really looking at which one is most aligned to engagement. So you can say with certainty, if people answer positively on that question, if it's a 1, they are absolutely going to be engaged. And time again we have found that is the emotions question, not questions about line manager or inclusion or all those really important other factors, but actually it's the emotion question, until recently. And that's what we want to kind of get into. So Jodie, why don't you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I'll start by just covering what we're seeing in this graph. So there's a few things that this is telling us. Of course, we've got the years along the bottom, and then the engagement and positive emotion scores, which are percentages there up the side. And what we can really see is that over the last few years, so 2019 to 2021, the engagement index scores and the positive emotions have tracked very closely alongside each other. As Matt says, there's a correlation between the two that's very strong. Interestingly, what we've seen in the past year, so over the course of 2022, was a divergence of these two scores, which we'll get into the reasons behind that, because there's some more data behind that and some interesting context to add behind that as well. But just to have a look at some of the data from the previous years, just very quickly, what we noted here between 2019 to 2020, we've got a big peak there. That really came about as a result of businesses ramping up their responses at the start of the pandemic. We saw engagement scores score, people were communicating more, checking in with people more regularly. As things went on over time into 2021, it was very long. We were in that climate for a long time. We saw burnout starting to set in, a lot of stress, people's well-being was suffering. So things then, quite as quick as they went up, they really did start to drop off again. Now we're in this more post-pandemic world, adapting to new ways of working. We've seen a more clearer picture now, really, of what's going on with people at work, how engaged they are, and also how they're feeling. So the scores diverging, engagement going up. We would explain this by we've had a lot of focus on engagement. It is becoming more and more of a business priority, more and more recognized, which is fantastic to see. Leaders putting more focus on this, more investment behind it, which is really great. However, on the other side of that, if you like, with the positive emotion score falling, we've got this difference, we've got something lagging behind, which is why the emotions are so key here, to really know what is going on, what's behind that, which, as I mentioned, we will get into what it is exactly in the next few slides.
Definitely, yeah. And I think just say 6 percentage points is, statistically very significant. And for us, what we want to kind of get into for you is, as we said again at the beginning, is to really give you some thought-provoking ideas and data to take back into your organizations and reflect on how could we use this? What does it mean? What are we missing? What should we be focused on? Because whilst it's great news that engagement's going up, and we'll show you the reasons we believe that to be the case, actually how people are feeling in the workplace is actually dropping pretty significantly. You see actually that trend data from 2020 is still on a downward trend. And I think it's also fair to say, Jodie, that's reflective, and we're going to get into this now, of a lot of what we've seen around the quiet quitting and the great resignation. That while people are answering the questions around engagement very positively, actually how they're feeling is driving their behavior and what they're actually choosing to do. So let's dig into that a little bit.
Yes, fantastic. So if we needed any more proof, if that wasn't enough already, just to really show here the impact that how we feel has on how engaged we are at work. So focusing just for a moment on those top two graphs or circles there, this is showing us the engagement index score. So the first one on the left for people who feel positively. So this is when someone's asked how they're feeling, they chose solely positive emotions as a response to this question. Their engagement index score up here at a whopping 92%, which is just astonishing, really. It's a fantastic score. Let's put that into context. We saw on the previous slide that the average engagement index score is sitting at 71%. So actually, we can see the impact there, if we move over to the negative side, that those negative people are having on the score. And it also tells us actually that the negative population, they are more of a minority, because of course the 71 is sitting much closer to the 92 than it is the 22% there for the negative population. But at the same time, 22% is an incredibly low score there. Great question that's come in on the chat. Just to answer that one quickly, so just checking in on where the 71% and 65% have come from. What is the data based on? So thank you for asking. So that is based on, those are the 2022 scores. So that's across all engagement surveys from our Inpulse data set across all our clients from 2022.
Great answer.
Fantastic. So the circles we've got at the bottom are just to give a little bit more depth to what we're looking at, a little bit more information about what particular emotions have on how we're feeling. So over on the left-hand side, I've just pulled out a few here just to add a little bit more richness, a bit more depth to what we're seeing. For people who feel proud, and this is about working for their organization, so it's how do you feel about working at, and then the company's name. So people who say that they feel proud, 89% engagement there. And this doesn't include whatever their other emotion alongside proud might be. So they may well be feeling some other negative emotion alongside this, but pride and that feeling of proud, it really demonstrates a sense of commitment to the organization. I think strong advocacy links really closely with pride as well. So it's definitely something we would want people to be feeling. And we can see there just how strongly that impacts engagement.
But it's a really important point there as well around the positive emotions. Whilst we offer a range up to 6 different positive emotions, from sort of almost semi-neutral through to very positive, pride is the key one that you want people to feel. And so what our job then is to do is to help our clients that we're working with to go, okay, so how do we, what are the tools, what are the techniques, what are the tips, what are the strategies to help engender pride in the organization? Because that is going to be such a key driver. You get people feeling proud, they are really, really likely to feel very engaged.
Absolutely. And it links very closely with the one alongside it here around commitment as well. So people who are feeling committed. Once we move committed into proud, it's almost like a next level, because that's when we've got that deepening the strength of that connection to the organization in there as well. So committed, as we'll see in just a moment, scores very highly along on our list of emotions. We often see it coming out top in surveys, so really positive impact that's having there as well. What's quite interesting when we look to the negative side, I'll just pulled out these two because I think we've got quite interesting difference between anxiety here and unappreciated. So actually, for people who feel anxious, which an emotion we saw a lot throughout the pandemic, we can see, yes, it has an impact on engagement. We're down at 42% there for people who feel anxious, but that's nothing. Compare that to how people score for engagement when they feel unappreciated. And if we look at what's behind these, if we talk about anxious and anxiety, we're really talking about a well-being issue there. People maybe struggling with their own well-being at work, and that feeding into how they're feeling and how they're showing up in themselves at work. It's also largely related to external influences we see often with anxiety. So, of course, why this was high in the pandemic, it's been high over the last year as well, with concerns around energy crisis, even external events such as the war in Ukraine as well, impacting how people feel, and they bring that version of themselves to work. When we look at unappreciated, on the other hand, we can relate this to the organisation much more closely. So based on how people are behaving within the organisation, so strong connections here with the culture, with leadership, line managers. So unappreciated is an emotion that's got many levels to it, where there's many dimensions. People can feel it for all sorts of reasons, which we've got a little bit more information on that coming as well, as to why they feel unappreciated. But we're looking here really at human skills and connecting with people.
Jodie, that's such a powerful point. I just want to make sure everyone heard that who's tuned in and watching on recording, that the anxious emotion, negative emotion, is typically driven by external factors. But the unappreciated emotion is typically driven by internal factors that are well within the control of the organization. And literally, we could tear our hair out the number of times we're like, literally, this is coming down to, and we'll get into the detail of this, but sometimes, managers just being more appreciative of the people in their teams, or senior leaders just saying thank you a little bit more. But it's so powerful to know we can deal with this community who feel unappreciated, who you can see the impact it has on their levels of engagement. It's 27% engaged, right? By just doing some small tweaks, some small changes within our organization, and absolutely within our gift. We have the control to make this difference. Whereas anxious, absolutely, there happen to be other significant factors that aren't necessarily within our control to impact. But the good news is that has a much less impact, almost half, compared to being appreciated.
And we'll see how these emotions fit into our bigger picture of what's actually going on. So what is the data telling us right now in terms of, so this is from the end of 2022, so very close to where we are now in terms of the emotional climate and what's going on, and the comparison there against 2021, so that we can see how that shifted. So starting first of all, looking at that positive box, which is the top one with the green there. So these are the top 3 most dominant emotions that we've seen in 2021, then 2022. So first of all, what stands out, committed has remained at the top. So I mentioned previously, that's fairly typical that we see commitment coming out strongly. Often we see behind commitment, personal commitment behind this, which really means people feeling that they want to give their best at work, they want to carry out their tasks to the best of their ability, and they're committed to achieving their role and their objectives. For 2022, we can see motivated coming just underneath that. It really echoes the sentiments of committed, so there's a similar sentiment coming across there, that people are motivated. Really good word to have in there as well, though, someone feeling motivated. That's how we want people to be showing up at work. And happy for 2022 there as well. A lot behind happy comes from job satisfaction. So this comes out as a main theme behind why people feel that. They enjoy their work, they enjoy the day-to-day tasks. We get lots of enjoyment of spending time interacting with colleagues, customers, comes through there as well. The nature what they're doing day to day.
Which just pausing on that, this is interesting because we have seen that come up. So below these list of 3, there are all the other emotions, but it is interesting that happy's made it into the top 3 now, and in large part because it seems that post the sort of lockdowns or whatever, and recognizing absolutely the workload is a major issue, still just driving some stress we'll get on to. Actually, people are really back to enjoying their jobs as opposed to enduring their jobs, which I think it felt like a little bit during the pandemic, because it was just constant, never-ending work, because for many people they're at home that way.
Absolutely, it's balancing that almost against what we've lost from the top 3 with that coming up. So great that we've got happy there, but let's have a quick look at what we've lost off the list of the top 3, the positive emotions. So hopeful is an interesting one. Hopeful, it's an emotion that really speaks to resilience, and how people are within themselves, how they're showing up, what their outlook's like, where their mindset is at. So interesting that we've seen that dip off, slight concern there, and also a little bit of a concern, perhaps red flag, that we're seeing around proud dropping out. Matt mentioned that proud's really important to organizations to have that in terms of building that sense of commitment and people feeling proud. We saw the impact that has on engagement scores. So we've got a little bit of balance here. Great that we've got happy up there, people enjoying their jobs, but maybe a little bit of an area of concern, something to watch out for. And we'll come on to why pride is dropping off as well. We've got some more data behind that coming up also. So then onto the negative side, again, picture right at the top there with stressed has remained fairly consistent. So stressed, fairly typical to see behind that, workload. It's coming up again and again. It remains an issue, which is a concern, because lots of organizations are putting their effort behind trying to help people with this, but it's still, maybe what's being done isn't having the desired impact. Things seem to only be continuing or worsening even in some instances as well.
Well, I think it's very clear the workload and the stress is linked to the attrition. And so again, for all of you who are listening in, I think if you can deal with the attrition and the lack of filling the jobs, there is no doubt stress will reduce. Absolutely no doubt. It's so highly correlated alongside this just challenge of we've got high turnover and we're also not able to fill some of the roles as well.
Which links very strongly with the next 2 coming up there around the unappreciated and the irritated also.
We'll just pause for a moment. Kelly, thanks for your message, which is, do you have any key factors? Free text to suggest why these are dominant emotions. The good news is, yes, we asked them immediately after, why do you feel stressed and anxious? And then we actually have an algorithm that puts them into the free text comments into categories up to 21. It's not a keyword analysis, it's a true algorithm looking at the actual sentences. And then you said, so yes, we do, and we're going to come on to that. What is it that positively and negatively impacts people? Obviously, we get anxiety around external factors, but are there key factors around pay, micromanagement, hybrid working? The answer is yes, and we are literally going to come on and share some of the why behind these emotions shortly. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what we're speaking to now, a lot of it does come from those free text comments. So those themes that we're seeing behind it, what we're talking over around these emotions that are what's coming out. Yeah. So with those negative ones, so for example, stress, we can see from our algorithm behind that, we've got workload. Linking in with the next 2 on there, unappreciated and irritated, we're also seeing things around recognition. So we'll keep reward aside from that. I know you mentioned that in the comment there, but we'll keep reward separate. That is a separate theme for us from recognition. Recognition is more the non-monetary factors, so how people are treated, so line managers giving recognition, praise, the organizational culture, how people feel valued for their contribution. We've got a side of unappreciated around people feeling like the organization is investing in them as well, that they're prioritizing their development and their growth. Maybe with unappreciated is that then they're not seeing that. We do also have valued as an emotion, which of course speaks to the flip side of that, which we have also seen drop down the list. Irritated is an interesting one as well. I have to touch on that one because it does come out as a key theme. It has risen way up the list. It previously wasn't anywhere near our top 3, but it's shot up into 3rd place for 2022. Behind this, we can link it closely with stress. So we've got lots of irritations relating to the workload. And again, if we take the next level behind the themes behind that, which does come from our algorithm in our system, we've got things relating to systems and processes causing delays. Really big one that we've seen the rise of over 2022. A lot of that, again, linking to changed ways of working, hybrid working in there as well, that people are needing to adapt, and that hasn't quite slotted into place yet to make things run efficiently and smoothly.
So if we just sum that up, because just for Kelly, I want to make sure we've been really clear. The theme behind stress is the number one theme is almost always workload, which we then link also because people do talk about we don't have enough people working here. So it's a resources issue. So workload links then to resources, and the resources both, there's not enough people working here and we're losing too many people. So hopefully that's really clear on the why on that. On the unappreciated, it's typically to do with a lack of gratitude, a lack of thanks, a lack of being recognized. And so it's about recognition, not reward, to be clear, as Jodie said. And again, that absolutely links to line manager, which plays a key role, but also culture, because it's felt that the values and the behaviors within the organization aren't appreciating or aren't bringing appreciation. And then with irritated, actually a big one is processes and systems. So that's people saying, you know, these annoying processes that are being rolled out or changed again just is causing a lot of irritation. And then all the systems aren't fit for purpose and aren't enabling us to do the work we really want to do. And also actually sometimes I'm irritated of the coming into this year has been change as well. So for a lot of people irritated with, I'm trying to get on with my job. We've made lots of changes already, and now there's more change coming, and a sense of, you know, not necessarily when will we get back to normal. I think people recognize change as a constant, but certainly when will I be able to focus more on doing the things I actually need to do my job, as opposed to dealing with this change. So I hope that has answered your question there. Oh, pressing the wrong button, sorry. Okay. Great. So let's get to the biggest shifts in the survey question. So we're now looking at the some specific questions, and we're looking at like the top biggest shifts within the Impulse community, and we're looking at the biggest negative shifts. And we'll come down, so I'll let you guide us through that.
Yeah, so this is really helpful alongside those emotions and those themes. This gives us an extra level or a different lens to look at. And actually what we see when we look at these questions and the breakdown here, so we've got different engagement factors, all widely agreed, all of these things that feed into how engaged we are at work. But what we'll see is actually a lot of this, we already know from having asked people how they feel. We've already seen a lot of these themes come out. This just helps perhaps reinforce it, give us that extra bit of detail as to why. So starting with the positive shifts, so in that top box there, we've got two main themes that come out from these questions. So first one, of course, would be around leadership. Arguably, all four of these are really strongly related to leadership, but two very directly are asking people about leadership. And it's fantastic to see those things going up. So that really represents a lot of effort that's gone in behind that. So definitely worth pulling out, acknowledging, appreciating that actually, as we mentioned, engagement scores are going up because engagement is moving up the agenda. The people agenda is getting more, gaining more presence and strength. People are recognizing the importance of it. So it's working. Keep going.
Yeah, just to say on that, we were always crediting our clients because, you know, inclusion, particularly in psychological safety, over the last 3-4 years have been right at the top of the agenda. And the great news is that the activity and the interventions and the programs that companies have been putting into place and investing a lot of money in, actually, certainly our client base have, is starting to pay off, and they are starting to see some really significant moves on that as plus, we would say plus 5 percentage points is a statistically significant increase or decrease. So yeah, really important that that's highlighted, and hopefully it's been the same for you in your organization.
Absolutely. Really important links with the emotions here as well. So the inclusion links in well with people feeling happy within their role. And leadership, of course, is so important that people feel and trust in the leadership, feel that they understand, for them to have that commitment to the organization there as well. So then looking at what we've seen shift in the negative direction, so question scores that are really dropping off. I have to start with that one at the top there around enablement, with a 15 percentage point drop, which is huge. This one's fallen off a cliff. Enablement, of course, relating to people feeling they've got everything that they need to carry out their roles, so that their sense of enablement, can they get on with what they need to do day to day? So there's quite a range of different things behind this. So enablement, of course, means having the tools, the equipment that you need. It also means having access to the learning, the resources that you need. Interesting one behind enablement, people also refer to things like having enough time. So if people don't have enough time, they can't get their job done as well. So we've got some other less tangible things here, perhaps is the way to describe it, behind enablement as well.
I think it'd also just be fair to say on enablement, this is a real product of the hybrid working.
Yes.
And the pendulum has swung, as you all know better than I do, in your organizations, and in terms of everyone's either at work or on the front line, and that's how it is, or now it's very different in terms of where people are and what they're doing. And what's clearly not caught up yet is the as you say, people don't feel quite enabled yet to work in the new ways as well as they would like to.
Absolutely. And of course, that's linking with the emotion that we saw around irritated, particularly. It adds to the stress, of course, because inefficiencies causing delays in workload as well. And it links with the bottom point in this table here as well, around collaboration. So people not necessarily feeling that they work effectively together within their teams, across departments, as a wider business to get the job done, losing a sense of enablement around that side of things as well. I'm going to join the two in the middle together for a moment around retention. So that's people, their intention to stay working at the company over the course of the next year, and learning and development. So we're looking here, yes, around development, but there's an element of career progression and growth opportunities behind this as well. So a real concern to see these two fall. We've got almost an internal and an external perspective on these. So internally, of course, those are the ones more within our control, where we really need to focus. The unappreciated emotion is linking very strongly to people's intention to stay with the organisation and how well they feel the organisation is investing in them for the future. So these two linking with unappreciated rising, it's not really a surprise to see people not necessarily feeling that they can see themselves continuing to work in the company, and not feeling that the company is investing in them as individuals.
And that's, I mean, it's a really powerful, I don't know if you're experiencing that in your organisation, but almost 1 in 4 people are saying they're not intending to stay, which again really speaks to the issue we have around quiet quitting, great resignation, attrition levels. We've really seen that, I mean, grow exponentially over the last year, unfortunately, in a very negative way.
Absolutely. And more on the external side there as well, we've got a more employee-led job market right now, which is certainly feeding into this. People feeling they've got more options, maybe looking elsewhere, even if they're not necessarily made a move just yet, feeding in, of course, with the quiet quitting there also. Great. So this really is just to pull together what we're seeing here. So what is the overall climate? What's going on? We've got this strong sense of commitment and people happy at work, but actually there's this huge storm cloud hanging over us at the moment. And the number one top reason behind that has to be this unappreciated. So I know you might be saying that, well, stress was the highest emotion. Actually, unappreciated is what's growing currently, and the stress really does feed into this as well. So we do have the stress on the side there as a little extra, along with irritated, but the focus is really has to be, as we'll see when we go into giving some more practical advice as to where to focus your attention, it has to be on this emotion around unappreciated. So looking at things like recognition. Do people have a chance to contribute? Is there a two-way open line of communication there where people are getting praised, being given feedback, positive feedback, and not just feeling like they're only getting addressed when there's an issue, feeling heard? It gives them that opportunity to feedback their views as well. And of course, those opportunities for growth and people feeling like they can build a career with the company that they're working at.
And what's so frustrating, Jodie, is I think we've talked a lot about a lot of what's behind unappreciated, back to Kelly's point about what's driving this, isn't it? You've got it here, is things that are within the gift and the ability of leaders and line managers to do something about. So, again, going back to your organizations, please say, I was on a webinar with Inpulse, employee engagement experts, and they were like, we can deal with this unappreciation, which comes down to people feeling valued and heard and then recognized. Whilst that is happening in some places, there's so much more that organizations could do, and it's not a hard thing to do. It does take a little bit of time. I will give managers that, but surely that's where your time should be going? That's the sort of thing you should be doing.
Yes, absolutely key when we're thinking about culture here, because that's really what we're talking about, and creating that more people-centric culture.
Yeah, I think on stressed and irritated, slightly more difficult factors, or just take a bit more thought. Typically, they take a bit more of a sort of company-wide, potentially initiative or project to sort of look at how do we do that. Although I will again say on workload, if we can deal with attrition, which is about helping people want to stay where they are, which we've already covered the reasons why they're wanting to leave, you are going to have such a big impact then on workload. External factors is very difficult to deal with, except acknowledging them. And that's again what we would tell our client base is, please, do acknowledge, there's a cost of living crisis. Do acknowledge that, there has been some fear put into the system, if you like, through the war that's happening in Ukraine. And if you think about that in the context of what we've just had over the previous 2 years, and then the political system, particularly in the UK, ironically slightly less so in the US now, feels still quite unstable. And then again, as we work a lot across Europe and a number of other areas, that also can have an impact too. That's also recognizing the whole person, which I think you mentioned, Jodie, about recognizing that people come to work, they're not robots, they're not people living in isolated lives, they're living in the world like we are, and things do impact them as they happen. And I think the piece with the systems and process collaboration, we're working with a number of our clients on some big change programs, and actually we're actually measuring through the change to really spot where the emotions are going negative, the why, and then being able to answer or deal with those in real time to help try and reduce. You're not necessarily going to get rid of irritation, but you can certainly reduce some of the irritation by just spotting what's causing it quicker and dealing with it faster. So that leads us to, I just want to set out a little bit, and we've got about 15 minutes left. Our approach to engagement, building on what's already been said. Look, all of you will know that there are engagement inputs, and they're the factors that influence how engaged people are. And if we give you some examples, they'd be senior leaders, look on the left here, local leaders, learning and development, strategy and direction. These are the types of things we mean when we talk about the engagement inputs. The engagement outputs are what happens when people feel engaged. And that's the kind of the magic moment where people choose to stay in the organization longer. They choose to give more of themselves so their performance goes up or their motivation. They speak well of the organization and their well-being is impacted positively. They are the kind of engagement outputs, and really happy to share not only our research on this, but the academia is like, it's nailed, it's solid, and we're really happy to share that with you. Should you want to just let us know. And so what you then see is actually, and we did a big piece of work, Jodie and I and a couple of other team members, around looking and saying there are these sort of 20 global factors that almost every engagement company and academic paper would say are accepted. But then what we recognize is each industry has a focus or a lens on some of those global factors more than, say, another industry. So, for example, there's been a lot of focus on training and development or learning and development opportunities in construction, and really increasing that, which maybe hasn't been there in, say, technology. And our job is to sort of share with you what those industry factors are. And then, of course, every company has their own specific factors, which, again, you'd be surprised how many people don't know what they are. And that's kind of the job, is to work out what are you specifically focusing on. So, for example, it could be your culture you're really focused on compared to others. So why is that important? Because actually, what we want to do is get your engagement index to be the output questions. And when we do, we can then start to see which of those is really driving the engagement index. And even better, we can then see which of the inputs is driving the key engagement output. And that is such powerful data for you, because you can suddenly see, rather than having all this data going, I wonder what's going on, what's really happening. It's something like, okay, so actually we're seeing a real improvement in retention, and where people say they're going to stay, that really drives up the engagement output the highest, or the engagement index, sorry. And of that one, it's because if it's their local leaders and say purpose and impact, it's really driving the retention. Suddenly you have across your departments or your sectors or your countries, you can see where it is you really need to focus, and you can give your senior leaders the tool of clarity and simplicity. And again, often we find, would it be fair to say, Jodie, some of the clients who come to us, they've made engagement very complex, and there's almost, they can't see the wood for the trees, or they don't know where it is they really need to focus to make a difference. Well, with our approach, we think you can. And then lastly, we also correlate your engagement index to your attrition, your sickness, so you can see within the teams what's going on and what's driving it too. So really, really powerful approach. So just to bring this to life, within the engagement index, we have questions around productivity, retention, well-being, motivation, advocacy, because they are the outputs that you get, well established. eSights is about the inputs and choosing the right ones, and then you've got the emotional analytics. So suddenly you've got this beautiful holistic picture that really helps you understand what's going on, where you need to focus, what you need to focus on, why you need to focus on it, and what the best outcome is you could get by doing all of that. So that leads us in with about 10 minutes left. So thank you for staying with us. We've literally kept, I think 95% of people have stayed on so far with us. So thank you. We've got about 5-10 minutes left. Where do we suggest you focus in 2023? So we've come up with 3. We're going to get into them now. We think connection is the number one area you need to really focus on. How do you help your people feel connected? There's a cultural issue, so the values and behaviors, and there's also this element around collaboration, which is driven often by processes and systems too. We love Brené Brown in Impulses, there's no doubt. And I think this sums up for us where we really try and challenge our clients and work with them actually to support them on how do you help people feel connection. She just put this absolutely brilliant about when people feel seen, heard and valued, and where they can give and receive without judgment, and where they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. Wow, just put so pithily and so perfectly. And so our job is we actually help clients work out how you coach managers to be able to do those things and be that sort of person with their teams. And I'll let you build a little bit on that.
So what we know with connection, really important one there, and there's lots of different elements to this, as we can see in that Brené Brown description. And we know for the best impact on engagement, we want to build this at 3 different levels when it comes to connection. So breaking it down a little bit, local leaders. So what we're talking about there is our line managers. We really want to help them build these connections that then facilitate better engagement. So they're an interesting one, actually. What we tend to see with line managers, we often see really strong relationships here. Line managers in general tend to score well for respecting people, getting on with their teams, checking in with people, all tend to score fairly well. But actually, when it comes down to their more human skills around supporting people in their role, empowering people, that is where there seems to be more of a lack, and where almost the missing ingredient in terms of building that next level of connection that then helps people thrive at work. So there's definitely something there that we need to really hone in on to make sure we can build that connection. Second one, very similar in a way around senior leaders, but senior leaders need to build this on. It's a more strategic role that senior leaders play. So we need to bear that in mind and think about ways that senior leaders can build connection with people, even though they might not have those more personal individual relationships that the line manager would. So doing things like sharing personal thoughts, showing more vulnerability, giving personal reflections, adding that element of relatability, but also role modeling this whole process and showing that connection is important, because that's going to be how to get the buy-in from the line managers, show that actually we've got space for this in our culture. This is something we value. And
just to add, Jodie, that comes down to where they put their time. But what we see is that employees see that leaders can say the right things, but where they put their time is not into people. They put their time into processes and systems. They put their time into meetings, but not necessarily meetings that are listening and valuing and hearing and seeing their employees, but actually, or their teams, but actually more about processes and work and workloads. So that's such a simple, again, just few tools to do that. In everyone's senior leaders diary, they've made time to be seen, to help people feel that they've been seen, heard, and valued.
Absolutely. And then the final one on here, the last lens we've got on connection, is connecting with the organization. So how do we build this between an organization and individuals? A really important one, particularly, we've been talking a lot about retention, attrition. This is key. We need to make sure we've got this. And a key element of this is helping with that feeling of unappreciated, trying to mitigate that, resolve that. And one of the ways we can do this is through listening to people, understanding what people want, what they're looking for, what's important to them, show this level of individuality that we're investing in the future of individuals, not just the company. It's for each person within it.
Perfect.
Leads us nicely into culture, because this is a key element of connection. So it's almost another lens on it, another way that we need to look at it. We're seeing a re-emergence of culture, the need for culture, people wanting a culture. It's really come back over the course of the last year. So it's something that we need to refocus on, maybe look at what's going on with the culture currently and see what needs to be done there. So 3 key ways that we can do this. Dialing up what works. So this one's really interesting because actually lots of organizations are getting things right. For example, a great example, actually, the pandemic. We saw that peak with the scores, things shot up during the pandemic. So actually businesses know what to do, leaders know what to do, they know how to communicate with people. They're just not necessarily doing it, or not doing it consistently, which is key here. So we know what the behaviours are, let's replicate those, let's identify those, let's put them in place into other areas as well so that we can build on that. Second one, perhaps this point should come first, actually, because what we need to do for the culture is really define what it means. If we're talking about culture, improving it, building it, what does this mean within your organization? So it may well be that it's been a while since the values have been looked at. It may well be also that the values don't relate to what individuals really need, or what the feel within the organization really is. So does this need to be looked at again? We also need to make sure with values that we are not looking at a huge long list that's hard for people to relate to, hard for them to remember. We want to be really short and snappy here, limiting even three to five values can be a great number, so that we can be really clear on what it is. What does culture mean? What are the top 3 things that we need here?
Yeah, a couple of things just to add. I think I would say that often if you talk too much about culture, you end up with just cult. And if you don't talk enough about culture, you end up with And I think it's finding that balance of, no one wants to be part of something that's too obsessive about culture, but you also don't want to be part of something that's just a bit, what is it? It's not there. And I think involving your employees in the definition of that, which again, I get you'll say, well, that's obvious and we've been doing that, but you'd be amazed how much it needs to be re-looked at and checked. And by the way, for Impulse, when we say culture, what we mean is what you value. So do you actually value recognition or appreciation, and how you behave, and capturing that and really getting that, as Jodie's rightly said, and just a short, clear, this is what we value and this is how we want to behave. And we don't need lots of those, because again, otherwise you're sort of telling everyone how to live their lives, but just how you're expecting people to behave at the highest level in your organization can be super helpful. And then I think stand out from the crowd speaks for itself. Around making sure that your values relate to those behaviors, that people can see and feel and touch and experience, and call people out and go, that's not happening, I didn't see that, that's not how I'm being treated. So this stuff I would expect you all to know as from the roles that you have, but it's actually doing it and making sure it's being done consistently. Which brings us in very nicely to collaboration.
Yes, so collaboration, a key one. This one, it's an interesting theme because it's one that's growing, it's coming up the list. And what we're seeing previously, people really sought autonomy. That's really what they looked for within their roles, to be able to go seek independence, get on with things alone. We're almost seeing them shift back. Perhaps again, a post-pandemic surge where people are still really wanting to get back together, work better together. People want to find ways to do this. So what we've got to make sure we do here is use a bottom-up approach, a listening approach, to really seek what works. So doesn't work for leaders to be deciding the behaviours or ways for people to be working together. We need to go out and find out what people want, listen to people, and feed that into how we then move things forward. This links into this the second point around promoting a culture of growth. So what we mean here, there's again different lenses on this that we could look at. So we want people to feel that they can try out new things, try out new ways of working, and that that's encouraged within the organisation. Taking a level of risk here as well. So new practices for people working together. And again, links to the final point around how technology is used within the organisation as well. So how it's used currently. We're also in a time where modernisation and automation is really impacting how we work. So how we work as individuals, but also how we work together, the systems, the way we're interacting with others as well. So reviewing that, how is it helping people, and making sure that we've got lean systems there almost, that we're not adding to people's workload by looking at this. Actually, we're really honing it down and narrowing it so that we're helping people, adding tools that facilitate better ways of working together.
Fantastic, thanks, Julie. So for all of you listening, I really hope that that's helped you. We've really wanted to kind of not just show you the importance of emotions, but the why behind that. We want to show you where we think you need to focus and what you need to do in 2023. And finally, just wanted to share with you on a new part of Impulse. So not only do we do whole of engagement, but we recognize that actually we really need to focus on the leaders, because there's such a key input or factor into how people feel when it comes to engagement. And so we're really, really thrilled that we've now got the ability to look at to do a 360 leadership surveys on the platform, which then allows us to have league tables so we can actually see correlate a leader's score against their engagement score. So for the first time ever, you'll be able to see on a nice league table for all your senior leaders, here are the top leaders when it comes to their 360 leadership scores, and here's their engagement. And guess what? We're already seeing with our clients that people, the leaders who have really good 360 scores, actually typically have the lowest engagement scores. Why is that important? Well, it helps you focus on where to put your resources, what to put your resources on, and how you can actually make a difference and shift the, cause the change that we're all looking to do, because we've got all this great data, but we don't want to drown in data. We actually want to know, pinpoint with laser-like accuracy, and hopefully we've showed you that's exactly what we're about, and the impact that then that can have on your organization. So Lucy, I'm going to hand back to you, if that's okay, to bring us into land. But for everyone who's been on, and just a thank you for both Jodie and I for listening, and hope that's been really useful for you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jodie. Thanks, Matt. Really, really interesting session there. For all the attendees, thank you so much. I'll be in touch early next week with the recording and the slides if that's of interest. Of course, if you have any further questions for Jodie or Matt, or you're interested in hearing a little bit more about our approach and how we help organisations measure and improve engagement, do let me know. Other than that, have a lovely weekend, and I'll speak with you next week.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Take care.